Hey loves, welcome back to my channel. Today we are talking about why the universe sometimes breaks you. And also before I continue on talking about this, I also want to say the universe is you. Everything in your external reality is a reflection of your internal reality and processes. So sometimes when you're going towards a major change, a soul-led change, things in your external reality can seem very chaotic. Sometimes this looks like losing a job, a big move, death or divorce, money issues, sudden illness. And when it's happening, it feels so hard. It almost feels like I'm being punished. Like, what is going on? Why isn't anything going my way? I've personally gone through this multiple times during my self-development, my transformation journey. I currently have a few clients that are going through some level of this right now. And there's usually a few reasons why these things happen. And I want to talk about what those reasons are today to help give some wider level perspective on these types of quote unquote negative events that happen in your life. First, sometimes things get taken away from us. Like, for example, that job that actually wasn't meant for you, or that relationship that actually wasn't meant for you. And they implode in these ways, but usually there were little whispers coming up until that point before the universe, before your external circumstances screamed and updated the situation for you because it was no longer in alignment for where you were going. And this is also a skill to start listening to the whispers before it turns into the scream, before it turns into this extinction level event. Because sometimes our ego really wants to hold on to past identities, hold on to things that are familiar. And it's hard for us to let go of things that we think bring us safety, bring us stability, somehow jive with our identity that we currently have at the moment. So when things get taken away, it's usually a gift in disguise, even though it doesn't feel like that at the time. And sometimes it's really hard to do this, but when you are in the moment of getting the metaphorical rug pulled out from underneath you, is to stay and trust, up your self-care routine, up your inner child work, take care of yourself for sure. But understand that this is a plot point that in the future you will have such great perspective on why this had to happen. So if you're going through something like this right now, really sit with it and tap into, I love to do this exercise where you tap into your future self, tap into the version of you 20 years from now and ask them, visualize, bring them into your mind and ask them, what was the lesson here for this time of my life? It always usually has something to do with your identity, your self-concept, your confidence, your self-worth. Because when big things are taken away from us that were attached to our identity, it forces us into a change. Another reason why these events can happen, and especially if you see that it is a recurring pattern or you are going through something that you have gone through earlier in life and you're going through it again, chances are it's coming up for a nervous system repatterning and a healing. So a lot of people don't understand that this is what's going on, and they keep finding themselves in the same cycles that they don't want to be in, whether it be relationships that don't work, whether it be money issues, whether it be consistently taking jobs or career moves that don't work out. So let me explain this nervous system repatterning. Essentially, the way that your nervous system works is your body holds on to the information of any trauma or any negative event that happened to you. And one of the ways to clear it is you go through this event again, and then you get out of it on the other side and you get to a sense of safety. This then tells your nervous system okay, the threat has actually passed and I no longer need to be in high alert. So I saw this example for a woman who experienced being part of a hurricane. She saw people die. She couldn't save everybody, and she had this trauma that was living inside of her body that she could not clear. The only way for her to really bring it back up to the surface to clear was to go into a volunteer emergency responder type of role where they role play over and over catastrophic events where they're saving people. And this helped repattern the trauma in her nervous system to be able to move past that. But sometimes you'll just find yourself in these reoccurring patterns and you're like, why does this keep happening? And it's because your nervous system is looking for resolution. And this is where you see things like repetition compulsion, where you keep finding yourself in these self-sabotaging patterns, and it's because unconsciously, again, your nervous system is looking for that resolution. So if you're in a state that's very undesired, you definitely want to ask yourself, is this a pattern? And if it is an opportunity to become conscious, become awake while you are experiencing the pattern. I'm gonna use this as an example. When I was a child, I was sexually molested by my grandfather. And while, yes, that was traumatic, the more traumatic part of it for me was essentially the splitting off of my family. I spoke up about what happens. I trusted my intuition. I spoke up, and it completely split up the family. And I kept getting into these cycles in my life where I would speak truth in very inappropriate times and reconfirm this pattern that it wasn't safe to speak up, that it wasn't safe to trust my intuition, and it was coming out in these very chaotic ways. And then a few years ago, I got sexually assaulted by a coworker, and I had to replay the energy of speaking up, saying what happened, like leaving my job, all of this stuff. And it was one of the hardest experiences I've ever gone through in my entire life. And it was because I was repatterning this experience that I had. My OG trauma was coming up. But because I had done a lot of work before this event actually happened, I knew. I was like, oh my gosh, here we are. I know this cycle. I've been in it before. And what have I usually done in the past, and how can I make different choices this time? Because you're essentially rewiring your neural pathways at that point. And that's on healing trauma. And I know what you're thinking, Jacqueline, does this mean that I have to relive some of the most horrible things that have happened to me just to get healing? No, not always. That's why there's modalities out there right now like EMDR and somatic therapy, where you can get right into nervous system work. And I have known that to be helpful, especially the somatic piece for me. Because yeah, it's just understanding that your body is very connected to everything that's ever happened to you. Your body remembers everything. So it's just now understanding that like, oh, my nervous system is actually I'm attracted to these cycles. I'm attracted, especially if you had any early life trauma, you might be attracted to instability. You might be attracted to chaos. Like, hi, that was me. My whole life, I was just unconsciously replaying my trauma by ending up in chaotic situations, being with partners that didn't respect me, letting my ego act on intuitive hits and completely destroy the path in front of me. I kept getting in relationships that reinforced the pattern of like, men only want you for your body and for sex. So just ask yourself, what were my patterns in childhood and how is it still showing up in my everyday life? Let's say you grew up in a household with lots of financial instability or poverty. How is that playing out in the way that you interact with money now? If you had inconsistent lover support from your family, how is that showing up in your romantic relationships and friendships? There is so much that we're usually asleep for. This is why it's called shadow work. It is the unseen. It is our blind spot. You don't have to do this work blind. And this is what I do as a shadow work coach, as a Jungian coach, is I'm there with the map and the flashlight, like, let's go in there. Hey, did you see that? Shine the flashlight. I've been thinking a lot about what I do recently, and I'm like, I'm kind of like a professional deprogrammer. Like, I help you deprogram your conditioning. So if you are finding yourself at just one of these transition points, or you're finding yourself in a cycle, definitely reach out to me. I would love to help you do work around this. It's usually during these tough times where the veil to ourself is much thinner, and it's easier to get to shadow content, and it's easier to do this work, and it's easier to get a really deep level transformation at the identity level. Right now, I'm currently offering one-on-one alignment sessions completely free. So if this at all resonated with you, feel free to book that call. I will put the link in the show notes. Another thing, I am doing a workshop on January 16th. It's going to be all about the somatic unconscious, all about the nervous system, all about how your body is very connected to shadow work and your self-development process. It's going to be experiential. We're going to be doing some like deep Jungian exercises to get in touch with your somatic unconscious and your unconscious mind. We're going to do a little shadow work. It's going to be a great time. I will also put the link to that in the show notes. If you're thinking about your 2025 goals right now and you're like, I have goals around my body, I have goals around my health, you definitely want to go to this workshop because it's going to connect a piece for you that I'm telling you. This was the hardest part of my journey, was connecting this somatic piece to my shadow work journey and to my journey of updating who I was at a fundamental level, how it's connected to your conditioning, how it's connected to your humanness, especially if you have any complex trauma, developmental trauma, or you are neurodivergent. This is a must go to workshop for you. I'm going to distill down the last 3 years of my experience and my education into a 75-minute workshop where you will leave educated and empowered on how to work with your body while you're doing shadow work. Okay, other than that, thanks guys. Thanks for being here, and I will see you next time.